Welcome to our conversation on eukaryotic cells. So previously in this video series, we were focusing on prokaryotes, which tend to be smaller and more structurally simple compared to eukaryotes. So if you take a look at this picture, you'll notice that there's quite a bit of internal organization associated with eukaryotic cells. So eukaryotic cells have a true nucleus, which is where all of the DNA is going to be. Correction, where most of the DNA is going to be. Aside from a nucleus, eukaryotic cells also have organelles. So if you take a look at the word organelle, you'll see the word organ and then L, E-L-L-E. That means tiny. So organelle literally translates into tiny organs. So stop for a second and think about what our organs do, right? Inside all of our bodies are certain organs, and they all have the same shape. Well, I'm saying all as in all people's organs have the same shape. So each organ has its own shape, its own place in the body, and its own job. Right? And my stomach is going to look similar to my mom's stomach and other people's stomachs, right? Stomachs have a general shape. It has the general function, no matter whose stomach we're talking about. And it's going to hopefully be in the same place as everybody else. This is going to be similar to the organelles of a eukaryotic cell. Okay? Eukaryotes are always going to have an endoplasmic reticulum and a Golgi. Now, there will be certain organelles that you find in plants, but not animals. Okay, so there is a little bit of diversity there, but these organelles are going to always have the same job. Okay, so pretty much organelles are the organs of the cell. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some important components of a eukaryotic cell. And we are going to go through this a bit faster than our discussion on prokaryotes, because a lot of people in micro have learned about a lot of these organelles in their prerequisite coursework. So we are going to just kind of hit the highlights, more of a review than an in-depth conversation. So as I mentioned earlier, all cells, whether it's prokaryotic or eukaryotic, will have a plasma membrane. That is the border of the cell. And the main component of the plasma membrane is a phospholipid bilayer. Now, one thing I forgot to mention in my previous conversation of the plasma membrane is that phospholipids are amphipathic. Okay, so remember when we talked about the structure of phospholipid, I said that the head group is hydrophilic or water-loving, and the fatty acid tails are hydrophobic or water-fearing. Phospholipids, right, have both water-loving and water-fearing properties. And that's what amphipathic means. Okay, amphipathic means the molecule is hydrophilic and hydrophobic. And not many molecules are amphipathic. Okay, so this is really important. And it's this amphipathic property of phospholipids that allow them to arrange the way they do in a phospholipid, with those hydrophobic tails touching each other and the hydrophilic head groups making the outside of it. And so that's important because notice the hydrophilic water-loving head groups are facing the outside of the cell, which is normally a watery environment. Inside the cell, we see those hydrophilic head groups again, and that's important because inside the cell is a lot of water. Okay, so the water-loving portions of a phospholipid are in contact with watery environments. And that is going to be protecting these hydrophobic, water-fearing tails. It's keeping them from those watery environments. Okay, and again, that's what makes this hydrophobic barrier, which prevents most molecules from just crossing the plasma membrane all willy-nilly. Okay, that's why the plasma membrane is important in regulating what goes in and out of the cell. So again, eukaryotic cells are going to do passive transport and active transport. I'm not going to go into all that on this video, but if you want a refresher, go back and check out the earlier conversation that we had when we were focusing more on prokaryotes. All right, so let's get into what makes eukaryotes eukaryotes. And that is going to be, if I can go the right direction, the endomembrane system. Okay, so this is unique to eukaryotes. This is going to be the network of organelles that all kind of work together to help the cell survive. Okay, so we're going to be dealing with how the cell makes important macromolecules like proteins and carbohydrates and lipids, also known as fats. And so this system is made up of several organelles and the connections between them, what help them work together for the cell to be successful. And so some of the organelles that make up the endomembrane system are going to be the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, both the rough ER and the smooth ER, the Golgi, and the lysosome. Okay, so not part of the endomembrane system are going to be the mitochondria, the chloroplast, both of which are energy producing organelles, nor is the peroxisome part of the endomembrane system, but pretty much everything else is. So remember, the nucleus is going to be where most of the cell's genetic material is going to be housed. And because DNA is absolutely critical for a cell's survival, it is protected by a nuclear envelope. It's this double membrane that envelopes that region, again, protecting the DNA from the rest of the cell. The nuclear envelope does contain pores to allow very specific things to come into the nucleus and very specific things to leave the nucleus. The nucleolus is part of the nucleus, and this is where ribosomal RNA is made. And that's going to be important for helping make ribosomes, right, which are the protein-making machines of the cell. Next up, we're going to talk about the endoplasmic reticulum. So this organelle is continuous with the nuclear envelope. So what that means, if you look at this bottom left picture, you can see the nuclear envelope here in purple. Okay, and you can see these little nuclear pores right there that I mentioned. So notice if you trace along the edge of the nucleus, you'll see that it connects to the ER at multiple places. That's what we mean by they are continuous. It literally flows from one to the other. And the reason for this is that the ER is an area of intense biosynthesis. Well, what does that mean? So synthesis means to make, and for bio, we're referring to living things. So here's where the cell is going to make all those things that a living organism needs to survive. So here's where proteins and lipids and carbohydrates are going to be made. So there are kind of two regions or two forms of the endoplasmic reticulum, the rough endoplasmic reticulum and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So it turns out that the rough ER is covered in ribosomes. And so the person that discovered this, they thought, well, these little ribosomes that are covering the surface of this part make it seem like it would be a rough feeling if you ran your finger over it. So we refer to that as the rough ER. Because the smooth ER doesn't have any ribosomes, it looks like a smooth surface. So the rough ER has ribosomes. That's where we're really going to be making a lot of proteins. The smooth ER does not have those protein-making machines, and so that's where carbohydrates and fats are normally going to be produced. It also turns out that the smooth ER is known for helping with detox. And so like some harmful things that the cell may encounter can be broken down in the smooth ER. And so for instance, one of my dogs, Kane, he has seizures. And so he used to take the drug phenobarbital, and that can be really rough on the liver. And so it turns out they found that people or animals that take these certain drugs that can be harmful for the body, they tend to have more smooth ER because they need more things helping break down those harmful drugs. So kind of cool. All right, so the ER is where a lot of macromolecules are made. after being made in the ER, those macromolecules get moved or transported to the Golgi apparatus, also known as the Golgi complex, but I normally, because I'm lazy, just call it the Golgi. So the Golgi is going to receive these macromolecules. It's going to process them. Normally, it maybe will add or remove some carbohydrates or things to the molecules. And once it puts the finishing touches on the molecule, it ships it out to wherever that molecule needs to be, whether that's inside the cell or outside of the cell. So a lot of people compare the Golgi to like the post office, right? The post office receives our mail, make sure it has everything it needs, and then we'll ship it out to its final destination. So think about real quick how the nucleus, the ER, and the Golgi are all dependent upon one another, right? They have different jobs, but they depend on one another. The nucleus has the DNA, which is the genetic material, okay, right? It tells the cell what it needs to survive. Then the ER is going to make a lot of those things that it needs. Those things are going to get modified and distributed from the Golgi. So kind of an example that I like to use to help people keep these organelles straight is think of like a Barbie doll manufacturer, okay, right? Especially if you think back a few decades, most Barbies looked completely identical. They've started to do a better job of making them more diverse, still some room for improvement. But let's just think of the general Barbie doll, okay? They all kind of look the same in terms of their body size and their body shape, right? So let's say that whoever the original person was that sketched that original Barbie doll, right? That was the blueprint for the Barbie. Think of that as the nucleus, right? It has the directions and the dimensions, all the information needed to make the Barbie doll. So then the ER would be like the factory that just mass produces that generic Barbie doll shape. Okay, it does not put on, the hair, the outfits, or whatever. It's just that Barbie doll body. Okay, so again, the nucleus had the directions. That was the sketch of the Barbie. The ER is where these things are just kind of made, mass producing these Barbie doll bodies. Then it's the Golgi where those final touches are put on. Okay, so that's where the hair color is going to be added, the eye color, the makeup, maybe it's scientist Barbie, maybe it's nurse Barbie or astronaut Barbie, whatever the case may be. Once those final touches are put on, right, then those Barbies get sent out to the Targets, Walmarts, whatever of the world for people to buy them. Okay, so each organelle has its own job, but it's dependent upon the other organelles to be successful. All right. So that is going to be where I'm going to end this video. The next video will focus on a few more organelles. So let me know if you have any questions.